Thanks for listening to the Open Discourse podcast. In this series, ODC co-founder and CEO Charles Mitchell sits down for a candid conversation with thought leaders, elected officials, entrepreneurs, and more. Today he is joined by ODC's Winston S. Churchill Senior Fellow and someone critical to the founding and continued impact of ODC, Professor Bill Gruver.
Bill Gruver, Senior Fellow at the Open Discourse Coalition. Thank you so much for joining the Open Discourse podcast.
It's an honor to be a part of this program.
Well, this program wouldn't be here without you, Bill. I'm grateful to you not just for your status as a founding father of the ODC, but also for suggesting that we have a podcast. So it's only appropriate that we would have you on. Bill, as you know, I was one of your students. Most of your students know you as Professor Gruver, but you've had 4 careers. Submarine service in the United States Navy, partner at Goldman Sachs, professor at Bucknell University, my alma mater, and now senior fellow at the Open Discourse Coalition. You took on career number 3 and career number 4 at a time when many of your peers would have bought a yacht instead. I'm profoundly grateful you made those choices. It's made a deep impact on my life. It begs the question, why didn't you go from Goldman to the beach?
Well, there's a very practical reason behind it, and a more philosophical reason behind it. The practical reason is that I loved my job at Goldman until the last day. My problem was that it was in New York City, and I'm not a city person. I've never been a city person, and I wanted to get out of New York City. I had built this little weekend house out in the Pennsylvania mountains. It's kind of my escape. And I found myself on Sunday nights going back to the city, asking myself, I've got this back asswards. I'd much rather be out here and occasionally go to New York as opposed to being in New York and having to escape out to Pennsylvania. So I wanted to return to rural life. It was in the days before the internet and remote work was possible like it is today. I had a non-compete in my partnership agreement, so I had to get out of financial services. I come from a family where services is just part of our DNA. I had a grandfather and 2 uncles who were state policemen. All of my male relatives served in the military. My brother is an FBI agent. So I had my first default option when I couldn't stay in financial services was to serve in some way, shape, or form. I foolishly volunteered at the local high school to teach, figuring with 2 Ivy League degrees and service on a nuclear submarine and being an owner-manager on Wall Street of a fairly well-known firm that I could teach geometry or algebra or social studies or something. And they informed me that I'd have to go back to college for more than 2 years because I had insufficient education credits. So, as I say somewhat facetiously, I started slumming, and I wrote letters to schools within a commuting distance of my home in the woods. And Bucknell and I made a match.
There's so much I want to unpack from that story. I know the story of part of that where you were wearing, as I recall, a suit very similar to the one you're wearing right now. And in order to get the job at Bucknell, you had to change out of it into a pair of running shorts. Can you tell that story?
Yeah. So my cold call letter to Bucknell was answered very respectfully, and relatively promptly with a ding letter where they said, you don't have a PhD, we don't hire people like you, but you sound like an interesting guy. If you're ever in town, I'd love to chat with you and have a cup of coffee. So I got that letter on a Tuesday. That Friday afternoon, I drove from New York out to Lewisburg. My first time in Lewisburg. I'd never been in Lewisburg. And I met the chairman of the business program at Bucknell at the time, who's now still a good friend. And he said, "I've only got 20 minutes for you. I've got an appointment at X hour, 4 o'clock, whatever it was." And we started chatting. We had a lot in common. We were hitting it off. And his phone rang, and it was his 4 o'clock appointment. And he said, "Well, I'll be there in 10 minutes." And then another 10 minutes went by. The phone rang again. "I'll be there in another 10 minutes." So after 3 or 4 of these reminder phone calls that he was late, he said, "I'd really like to continue this, but I'm late for my date to go jogging. You don't happen to jog, do you?" And at the time I was running triathlons, so I said, "Yeah, I can jog with you." And he said, "Do you have shoes? Because I can get you all the other gear that you'll need." And I said, "Oh, I don't know. I know I've got a pair up in Eaglesmere, and I know I've got a pair in New York. Let me just check in my trunk." And I never keep my running gear in the car. And I really didn't think it was there, but stalling for time to spend more time with him, I looked in my trunk and there was a pair of running shoes. So it was one of those providential signs from above that this was meant to be. And out of that, he decided that he was going to try to make an exception. They tried to convince me to be an administrator in a new program they were creating that combined the engineering and business educations into a quasi-industrial engineering major. And the negotiation, I would do some administrative duties in return for being in the classroom, because that was my definition of what I wanted to do. That was service. If I wanted to be an administrator, I would have stayed on Wall Street. So that's the story.
It took me many years after being in your classroom to know that I owed the privilege to a pair of running shoes. It's a great story. And by the way, I love the persistence, grit, timeliness, and all sorts of other things that I've subsequently seen in the way that story played out. I do want to go back in time to your time before all of that and hit on something you said earlier. But let's address frontally an issue you just raised that is perennial in higher education, not just in Bucknell, not just in your story, but the idea that you must have a PhD in order to teach young people. You obviously don't believe that. You got the job at Bucknell University in the 90s. You've never gotten a PhD. But what do you say to that idea that it is essential to have that particular credential in order to be a college teacher?
Professors are more than teachers. Professors are scholars. So I think a lot depends on the discipline. If it were French literature or astrophysics, I'm an advocate for a PhD being the entry-level degree. I think in professional programs, and many schools have this, the terminal, quote, terminal degree, the degree that you have to be able to teach, can be less than a PhD. The arts, does a great music professor have to have a PhD? No, I don't think so. Does a great business professor have to have a PhD? No. But they have to be more than teachers. They have to stay current in their discipline by scholarship. I think by my modest success at Bucknell, I think I was able to do that. And I didn't understand that getting in, because I thought it was just being teaching. That being a teacher was the same as being a professor, but it's slightly different. And that scholarship aspect of it is very important. And as long as somebody in a professional discipline that has the experience necessary and the capability and the interest in being both a scholar and a teacher, then I think they can be a professor. And rigid black lines in the professional disciplines I don't think are as appropriate as they are in some other disciplines.
What effect do you think that black line has on students today? Not just at Bucknell, but wherever it exists.
Oh, I think harmful. I think they miss a pragmatic aspect of a professional education that is very important. And if you're in a humanity or in the hard sciences, the discovery of truth in those disciplines can be all within the discipline and within the academy. When you get into a field like business, you have to get out into the practice of the art and the science of business in order to fully develop young people to be ready for professional careers in that field.
I didn't know any of this back in, I don't have the emails anymore, but I suspect it was 2003 or so when you emailed me as a Bucknell student and invited me to your office. I didn't know any of these nuances of the academy. I just knew there's something different about this guy. And that has been replayed over these decades now by many students. And I think what you just said about being a practitioner, it's not the only thing, but it's at the heart of it. Let's rewind a bit, Bill. You mentioned your lack of enduring love for New York City, and you mentioned that you had come from the country. You grew up in the Wyoming Valley of Pennsylvania. Most of your students, at least that I talk to, don't know much about that part of your life. So how did Bill Gruver start out? Tell us the pre-Goldman, pre-Dartmouth part of the story.
Yeah. So when I was born, my dad was in the military. I was born in Colorado. When the war ended, my dad and mom were from the same hometown in the Wyoming Valley, and they moved back there with me in tow. You say I grew up in the Wyoming Valley. We moved around a lot, and the anchor in my growing up was the Wyoming Valley, because every summer I'd be back there. So we moved from the Wyoming Valley, and this was all for work reasons. We're from my dad didn't go to college and started out as a blue collar worker, and we were moving where the work was, and but the anchor was always the Wyoming Valley, and the motivation that I remember as a kid to study and to read was you don't want to go to the mines. On both sides of my family were coal mining. Both of my grandfathers started out in the mines. One of them died in the mines. And that was, and the mines were ever present in the Wyoming Valley. The slag heaps were right outside your front door, and that memory was just pounded in. You better study, you better study. If you got bored, go read. And the other thing that was apparent was that the adjunct to being a good student that could enhance your ability to get out of the mines was athletics. So I was encouraged to participate in athletics, and those combinations of the fear of going into the mines, the encouragement to read. I could read before I went to kindergarten. And athletics got me out of the Wyoming Valley and got me into some fancy schools, and the rest is history.
What were those schools?
Undergraduate, I went to Dartmouth, and my master's is from Columbia.
Sequential or with a gap?
No, right away, right back to back.
And where did the Navy fit into all that?
So the Navy fits in when I was 18. There was a thing called the draft, where all able-bodied males had to serve in the military for a minimum of 2 years. And as I was getting out of high school, the calculus was, do I want to spend 2 years in the military as a trooper, as just a grunt, just a soldier or a sailor? Or do I want to spend a year or two more and go as a commissioned officer? And there was a program, the Navy had a program through ROTC where if you qualified and could get into the school that was part of this program, you got a free ride to college. So college didn't cost my parents a nickel. They didn't have that much to pay anyway, but I went on a complete free ride, and so I got sworn into the Navy my freshman year in the fall of 1962. Just last weekend, I was with a good friend of mine, and we were sworn in together. He stayed in. He became a career officer, and we were commissioned in the spring of '66 when I graduated. The Vietnam War was hot and heavy at that time, and I had the experience during my college life of spending each summer in the Navy, in different parts of the Navy, and none of them seemed particularly attractive in the middle of the Vietnam War. So I figured if I could defer my active duty, by the time I got out of graduate school, the war might be ended, and I could live a wholesome, productive life. So I deferred my active duty and went to Columbia, and the war was hotter than ever. So I never even went to Columbia's graduation ceremony. We were called to active duty in the spring of '68.
1968 was a rather auspicious time to be at Columbia University. It's something you've written about.
Oh, yeah.
But probably something that only people of a certain generation have any kind of visceral reaction to, like you just did. Could you paint the picture of what that was like?
Yeah, it was. I mean, unfortunately, it's familiar now because it just happened last year again. So, in addition to the war, there were enormous racial tensions in the country. Senator Kennedy had been assassinated. Martin Luther King was assassinated. There was a local issue in New York between the Harlem community that borders on Columbia and the university on a new gymnasium. So the local neighborhood was very upset at Columbia. Students were upset about the war. So these forces came together on the Columbia campus, and the campus was seized by anarchists, is the only way I could describe them. Some racially motivated, some war motivated, and classes were called off, and all the buildings were occupied by students and these other protesters. And it resulted in when a settlement was finally reached, it was like a week, no, it was probably 3 weeks before graduation. And it was the beginning of pass-fail grading. They gave you the option of taking a pass-fail based on your midterm exam, or coming back the next year for no more, the tuition, they'd recognize the tuition, but you could come back for another semester and complete the courses for a grade. Well, I didn't have that choice because the Navy called me to active duty, and so I got a pass in all my classes, and they mailed me my degree.
For those of us who've never lived through a campus occupation, what does that mean? Did they just yell and scream? Were they armed? What was it like?
No, they were armed. They had machetes. They had we called them burp guns. I guess they were like AK-47s or something. They seized buildings. They actually took hostages the first few days. They took some of the deans. I mean, it was bad stuff. It was scary times, and the university made the mistake of not acting decisively early enough, and it just festered and became more difficult the longer it went on.
How did you react to it at the time, and what did it teach you?
I reacted at the time. So when I was in college, many of my fraternity brothers used to go to Bermuda for spring break. For monetary and other reasons, I never had that opportunity. So there I was in the springtime of New York City, no classes, and there was a $99 round-trip flight to Bermuda. So I got on a plane and went to Bermuda. And I was in Bermuda when Dr. King was assassinated. I was in an all-black bar in Bermuda when Dr. King was assassinated. And suddenly all eyes were on me. And it's a moment I'll never forget. Never forget.
What did you do in that moment?
I just cried with the rest of the people in the room. It was a tragedy, regardless of what color your skin is. It was a tragedy. And they understood that. They were good people.
One last thing before we move forward from 1968. Most of your former students are not familiar with your athletic career. You alluded to the fact that you had some highly motivating reasons to get into sporting activities. What was your athletic career?
My father was famous for saying a lot of things, one of which is, it keeps you off the streets. He was afraid of too much idle time. So every season there was a sport. In the fall I played football, in the winter I played basketball, in the spring I ran track and played baseball. So football was clearly my best sport. And that's what got me into Dartmouth. I'm convinced had it not been for football, I wouldn't have made the grade. I chose Dartmouth belatedly, having initially been accepted at Princeton. Princeton ran an offense very similar to my high school offense, which was not run by many people. Many colleges in America at the time, only 3 schools still ran the single wing, Princeton, Penn, and UCLA. So I went to Princeton, initially committed to Princeton because I played a position that was pivotal to that offense. And then after I was accepted, I was invited down to Princeton doesn't have fraternities, but I was invited down to a party at one of their clubs on a Saturday night, and I came home from that thinking, holy smokes. I went to public high school in New Jersey. I said, do I want to be this close to home? And the next day I called Dartmouth and asked if they still had a spot for me. And anyway, so I get to Dartmouth. They run a very sophisticated kind of veer offense that I had no natural position for, but we played Princeton and Penn. So I was the star of the scout team for 2 weeks that first year because I was Princeton and I was Penn as the varsity was getting ready. Freshmen couldn't play varsity at the time. And the Penn game, I was a good scout team player. I taught the varsity a lot of tricks, but I guess I angered some of them and the next time I got to be on the scout team, a guy who turned out to be an All-American linebacker, I was doing a naked bootleg, and he blindsided me in what would now be called a targeting offense. It was legal play back then. And I woke up a few days later in the hospital with a massive concussion.
Wow. This was in practice, Bill?
Yeah, and that ended my athletic career.
What year were you?
Freshman.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what position did you play in high school?
Single wing tailback.
What did you draw from that adversity at such an early age?
Anger and frustration initially. Football was my whole identity. I didn't. I had a huge void in my life, a huge void in my personality, and it took me. It was really until my last days in the Navy and my early days at Goldman that I started to establish a self that I was comfortable with again. I was I didn't know who I was. It was one of my wilderness years periods in my life.
So football would have dominated your life from about 11 to 18. Pretty critical time in a young man's life.
18, 19, yeah.
18, 19. Well, let's scroll forward then, Bill, into your time in New York, your time at Goldman. It's a part of your resume that a lot of your former students pay some attention to. If my studying of all that is correct, you were the chief administrative officer of the largest division, the equities division. What are you proudest of from your time there?
I'm hesitating because I don't like the word proud.
Okay. What question would you like to answer? We can rewind and I'll ask you a question you want to answer.
I feel good about a few things.
Okay. So reflecting on your time at Goldman, what do you have the greatest satisfaction about?
That's very. Proud is too personal a word. And one thing I loved about Goldman, when it was a private partnership, it's pre-IPO days, is what I loved about the submarine service and it's what I loved about football. They were team efforts. I've always been a team player. And when you ask, what I'm proudest of, that implicit in that is that it was me, not us. So what I think we were able to accomplish at Goldman in my years, first of all, we stayed in business through the '87 crash, which was very difficult for a private firm when your balance sheet was financed by your competitors. Get into the technicalities of finance, but the commercial banks were financing the balance sheet of the private investment banks. So when the crash happened and our assets value diminished rapidly in a short amount of time, we had to post additional collateral with our lending institutions, who were also our competitors. And they could have, and they were planning to very strictly interpret those collateral requirements, which would have put us bankrupt. The Federal Reserve, thank goodness, didn't think that would be the best for the financial system. So they encouraged the commercial banks to relax some of those covenants to get us through the crisis. We restructured after that to put in better risk controls. So I feel really good about that greater risk control environment that we established post the crash. And then when I was a partner, I feel we had record years of profitability, and we were a commercial enterprise. We weren't wearing clerical collars. So that was the goal. And we did it in a way that we had very little client turnover, very little employee turnover, and we started to be an institution that drew talent from parts of America we hadn't drawn from previously. And I felt strongly about that, given my background. So we started recruiting at historically black colleges and universities, because we had next to no black employees. And we started making accommodations for women professionals, like a child daycare center, and appointing women. The military term would be we deep selected some women to take on major responsibilities before they were, in the zone that they were expecting employment or promotion. So those kind of bold, aggressive moves, and I'm not a chest-thumping feminist or promoting racial equality, but it just seemed stupid, as from a business point of view, to be excluding large parts of your population from your talent base. So we and so that those are the things I felt good about.
As a great country song goes, one could argue that's something to be proud of. But maybe we'll say it this way. That certainly sounds like a rewarding experience.
Very rewarding.
And when I think about that, Bill, it just causes me to wonder, okay, you've had these 4 careers: Navy, Goldman, professor at Bucknell, now senior fellow at the Open Discourse Coalition. Which one have you found the most rewarding, and why?
Well, it's like asking to pick your favorite child.
You're saying that to a guy with 4 children.
I know. It's not done randomly. They all were great at the time, but there are seasons in life. And the Navy that we didn't talk about much was just what I needed coming out of that identity crisis. It was maturity on steroids. I was a qualified officer of the deck, which meant for a period of each day, I was in command of the submarine. The captain delegated to me to run that watch section. We had more destructive power on my submarine than all of the ordnance expended by all of the belligerents in World War II, so, including the 2 nuclear bombs. Every bullet, every cannonball, every bomb dropped by Germany, Italy, Japan, France, Britain, Russia, Germany, we had more destructive power on this. And me at 26 years old, holy smokes. I'm not sure I've ever had as much responsibility again in my life. So it was, and it taught me lessons. I had some superiors there that taught me lessons that I learned to this day, and I use to this day. But after I got promoted off of the submarine and went to shore duty, I hated it. It was so boring.
When was that?
That would have been 72.
And where were you?
Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. And it was a prestigious job, but it was just not me. It wasn't fit for my personality. So as great a time and as much as I learned in the Navy, it was time for something else. Got the Goldman. Incredibly exciting. You know, from the first time I saw a trading floor, I said, "This is me." But a couple decades later, it was getting easy, and I was starting to get bored, and it was time for something else. So they were each great, but there's a time and a place for everything, and you have to be ready to move on.
What was the part you found the greatest about career number 3, being a professor at Bucknell?
The kids. There's nothing quite like seeing the light go on in a student's eyes, and you know it. You know it when you see it. It's hard to describe, but you know it when you see it. And that experience is very rewarding, where you've helped enlighten someone to the truth. And I found that enormously rewarding. I still do. That's why I'm still hanging out with you guys.
Well, you're moving me ahead of schedule, Bill, and that's fine. Let's talk about that. 5 years ago, it wasn't really a thing to teach a course through an independent nonprofit in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. That's what you've been doing. That same joy, that same feeling that you just described that you had in university classrooms, do you still have it to a greater degree, to a lesser degree? Can that same transformation occur in the life of a young person in a non-traditional format like you now teach in?
Absolutely. It's better than ever. And it's not because I think I've changed, but the generation, there's a new generation of students. So I think their needs are different than the needs of prior generations. And I think what we're able to provide through Open Discourse, paid commercial announcement from, is not constrained as it would be on campus. The experience of the last Tuesday night in September was one of the most rewarding. I've been at this now 30 years, probably more. And the last Tuesday night in September, where we tried that experiment of, instead of having a fourth guest in the seminar, we had what I called a great issues night, because I was sensing that the students wanted to go deeper into some of these third rail topics.
For those who haven't taken your classes, Bill, so what you're getting at is one of the hallmarks of your leadership seminar, which used to be an on-campus course at Bucknell, now is a program of ODC, is bringing in practitioners like yourself, people from your network, really. But this year, for that last Tuesday that you're referencing, you dispensed with that, and you did this great issues night, where there was no outsider at all. And what was there instead?
As I was saying, the course is called Theory, History, and Practice. The first third of the course, we talk about theories of what determines successful leadership, what are the predicates necessary to be a successful leader, as seen by different academic disciplines: sociology, psychology, history, humanities, etc. The second part of the course, history, we backtest those theories against historically universally accepted great leaders, Mahatma Gandhi, for instance. And then the third part, practice, is we test the students' understanding by bringing in live subjects, in effect, that I facetiously refer to them as our version of laboratory rats, so that the students can ask the questions to see if the theories that they've been developing hold true with the world of today and with contemporary leaders. In those discussions with the contemporary leaders, we occasionally would get into, or more than occasionally, we often would get into a third rail topic. We had an attorney in last week who practiced before the Supreme Court, and the subject of capital punishment came up, but we really didn't have time to do a deep dive on capital punishment. So this year, as you know, we've taken a very entrepreneurial course. We're not bound by 100-year-old bureaucracies and course approvals and such things. So we try things. If they work, we scale them. If they don't work, we don't do them again. So this year, rather than the fourth guest on that last Tuesday night, I gave modest assignments as homework and told the students, look, we're going to talk about whatever's on your mind and whatever you want to talk about. We had no political litmus test to get into the course, so I had no idea where the students' politics were. But after having spent most of a month with them, I had a suspicion that we'd have some disagreement on some of these topical issues. And I was a little nervous going into it. My style is not to lead the witness. I was purely the moderator. I'd introduced the subject. We followed George Washington's rules of civility, meaning no raised voices, no name calling, be prepared to use evidence, or don't have a point of view if it's not backed up with evidence. And I couldn't have been prouder of the kids. We spent 3 hours, nonstop, 3 hours. We started on immigration. There were several non-American students in the course who had much different views than born and bred American students on the subject of the new H-1B visa requirements. We moved from there to capital punishment. We moved from there to abortion, and we finished on gun control. And not once was there any hostility toward the opposing side, and yet I was seeing those lights go off in the eyes when people were actually listening to the other side. How unusual, instead of the echo chambers of modern media. And in the student evaluations after the course, the students rated that one of the highest parts of the seminar because they're so hungry for this. And yet, even though they're in Greek organizations or athletic teams where they're spending a lot of time with other students, it's been taboo to even talk about these things, or even in their families sometimes it's taboo to talk about these things. So I think we've hit on something, and how we scale it is the question before us now.
Bill, how did you create an environment in the classroom where it was okay and even good to have those discussions?
Yeah, that's hard, and the particularly when we compress a course into an immersion course where it's only 30 calendar days in length. There's a term, it's a Hindu term called satyagraha, which means loosely translated the truth force. I describe it to the students as, we've all heard the expression, you have to walk the walk and talk the talk. Satyagraha is you have to walk the talk. It's the antonym of hypocrisy. You have to practice what you preach. The first assignment in the seminar is for the students to fill out a pretty personal questionnaire so I can get to know them rapidly. But since I practice what I preach, I spend as much time as necessary in the first class reading my questionnaire to them, to all of them publicly, and allowing them to ask any question they want.
Your answers to your own questionnaire?
My own questionnaire. And they can ask me any question they want. Nothing's out of bounds. We have the Vegas rule, so it can't leave the classroom. But I'm told that that's what starts the trust relationship. That I'm vulnerable. I allow myself to show vulnerability, and often in the professoriate, that's taboo. You cannot show vulnerability. You are the expert. It's not who I
am. There's so much I want to get into with that, Bill, but I have to restrain myself and point myself in a direction. Having been in your classroom, when I think about that Great Issues Night, I think about the fact that many of your students say that one of the things that makes you atypical is that they have no idea where you stand on any of those big issues. That unlike many of their other professors, it's impossible to guess your politics. This is my moment. I don't have to guess.
Vegas rule doesn't go any farther than this, just between you and me.
Yeah, you and me and everybody listening and watching, including a lot of your former students who are about to learn something. So, Bill, how would you describe your politics?
I would say I'm probably a classical liberal. I think government is the last solution to most problems. So if it can be solved by the private sector, go for it. So that leads me to very interesting positions. I believe in legalizing marijuana.
It's part of your business career, as I recall.
I was on a marijuana company board. Yeah, I'm the grandson of 2 illegal immigrants to the United States. I have enormous sympathy for people trying to get into this country, and I think our immigration system is. We don't have the bleeper button, so I can't say what I really want to say, but it's screwed up. It's screwed up. And I don't think we can get, and what happened 3 or 4 years ago where caravans were coming across the border, that's a bridge too far. But I think the secret to success of this country has been our immigration, and we have to be more welcoming than is the zeitgeist right now. So if somebody hacked my my emails, I think I might be the only person in America that gets emails from Donald Trump, Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, at the same time, back to back, because I see value in both of their approaches. I love what President Trump has done in the Middle East. I like what Wes Moore has done with a not national service, but a state service program in Maryland for youth. I think if we had a version of the draft, our country would be a lot better. And I see Wes heading in that direction. So I like what he's doing in that regard. I don't like his taxation policy. I prefer Trump's taxation. So I see value and I've voted for Republicans or Democrats over the course of my life.
Speaking of such matters, Bill, this is the first time I've seen you in one of your Wall Street suits in a while without a lapel pin.
Yeah.
For the last many months, you've worn a yellow lapel pin.
2 years.
Calling for the release of the hostages in Israel and Gaza. Let's talk about that aspect of your worldview. Why is that such an important issue to you? And therefore, why do you appreciate what President Trump has done?
Well, we retired the yellow ribbon to a bulletin board in my office on Monday. I think stereotypical prejudice is awful. I've been the victim of stereotypical prejudice, not based on my religion, but based on my history, and it's unfair, and it troubles me when I see it happening to others. So when I can do something about it, even if something as dopey as wearing a yellow ribbon, I'll do it. And I think the Jewish people, who I, from my time on Wall Street, got to know. I didn't know any Jewish people growing up, but I got to know a lot of them working on Wall Street, and I have enormous respect for their cultural and their religious traditions. And for them to be singled out just because of the religion it's against my moral code. So when somebody engages that and I can help in some way push back against that, I will.
Speaking of helping in some way, Bill, you've told me in the past what you believe the finest hour of the Open Discourse Coalition has been. Tell our audience.
Yeah, so October 7th, 2023, when the massacre occurred at the Nova Music Festival in Kibbutzim nearby, the beginning of the next semester, a friend of mine on the faculty called saying that she had an advisee in her office who was dropping out of school because he was a Jewish young man, and he felt that the anti-Semitism on campus, although not as overt as it was at other schools, was still intolerable to him, and he was going to transfer. And she asked, because she knew or suspected, stereotyping, that I had some experience with Jewish people, she asked if I'd talk to him, and I did. That led to an introduction to the student's off-campus rabbi, and the rabbi then asked if he could tour our headquarters. He did, and for the last 2 years, because of their discomfort on campus, the Jewish kids at Bucknell have had their High Holy Day services in our building. And it's not specifically stated in our mission statement, But interpreting our mission statement as giving voices that are suppressed the opportunity to express themselves, that fits within our mission statement. And by the way, I do it with Muslim students or Christian students. Anybody that needs a space to express themselves without fear of retaliation, that's what we're about.
Amen.
So the fact that we were able to provide that, getting emotional, we were able to provide that help when it was needed. It was very rewarding.
Couldn't agree more. It's one of the most powerful and providential things we've ever had the opportunity to do.
Yep.
And at the right moment in history, we had the privilege.
Yep.
But when I think about that, it makes me think of your values. You've touched on a few of them in some of your answers. And I know that one of the reasons that you are motivated to be Professor Gruver and to have invested these many decades in the lives of young people is imparting values. What would you say are some of your most important values that you hope to be able to live out in situations like what you just mentioned?
Satyagraha, the antonym of hypocrisy. So one thing I don't like, it's hypocrites. James McGregor Burns had a term in leadership literature called mutuality. I think that's incredibly important. You have to live the lives of your people. In the military, the officers always ate last. We left the ship last. The sailors were more important than us. The students are more important than the professors. So that mutuality where you bond with your people is incredibly important to me. I also have some minor values that drive certain people nuts, including St. Joan of Sanibel. And these values are eroding in our current society. Attention to detail. If you don't get the small things right, you won't get the big things right. Procrastination. It doesn't get easier the later you take to address the issue. And lastly, I think a tolerance that I used to tell a fellow that worked with me at Goldman, who was a great baseball player and great baseball fan. Every winning team needs a left-handed pitcher. He was getting driven crazy by some of our best producing people at Goldman. Didn't always get to work on time, or didn't always go to that meeting, or didn't always, but they were enormously productive and their clients loved them. And I tell them, every team needs a left-handed pitcher, so you have to be a little tolerant of quirkiness when the underlying talent is there.
One of the things I love about being able to have this conversation is there are some of these things that I knew and have heard before. Many I haven't. Never heard that one.
Yep.
Bill, we've talked about your relationships with students. We've talked about some of the things that you have been privileged to be part of at the Open Discourse Coalition, your fourth career. I don't think we've yet hit on it directly, so let's do that. This innovative model, this entrepreneurial approach to impacting students' lives, why did you agree to be part of it 5 years ago?
Yeah. I was Well, the elephant in the room is I did not voluntarily leave Bucknell. I would have loved to have stayed at Bucknell. It was not to be, and things happen for reasons, and in many ways this is one of the best things that's ever happened to me. But when I can remember the conversation with you and Ken, the non-negotiable in my agreement was I'd have to be in the classroom with students. Because that's where I think I add the most value, and that's where I get the most personal satisfaction. Anything else I do will be based upon that as the core duty. And being able to combine that with the innovative entrepreneurism that I've always tried to practice and support has been a blessing.
What would you like people who are not as close to ODC, to your fourth career as you are, what would you like them to know about it that they might not grasp from afar? People who don't come back to their alma mater, people who haven't been to the graduation from your leadership seminar or another event. What do you wish they know that they might not yet have figured out?
So when you started this 5 years ago and I joined you, I knew it was needed at Bucknell. When I started at Bucknell, and in the early years, I would have vigorous, knockdown, drag-out debates with some of my fellow professors, and Michael Moore, Steve Stamos, both of whom were way to the left of me, over subjects like the minimum wage or Ronald Reagan's foreign policy. And we'd have a beer afterwards, and we'd talk about the next football game. So we were friends. In my last 10 years at Bucknell, that went away. And I was, they were shunning me, shunning each other. It was crazy. And instead of having debates, they just would boycott and protest against speakers we brought in. So I knew that there was a need for viewpoint diversity on our campus. Events of the last 5 years, culminating in the Kirk assassination and in the fire survey, where 34% of American college students, 21% at Bucknell, think it's okay to use violence against speakers they disagree with. We can't exist as a society with that larger percentage of our population thinking violence is okay when you disagree with somebody. So now I've become convinced that what we're doing, and we've learned a lot in the last 5 years, is not just needed in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, it's needed nationally. What we do that's different than what many other programs, and we were way ahead of our time. We were here before it was cool. Many of the programs that have popped up subsequent to ODC try to teach or explain what civil discourse is. We practice it.
They would never do your Great Issues Night.
We practice it. The Great Issues Night, the program we're having next week between the two state representatives, one an R, one a D, discussing the Trump presidency, where there's real disagreement in a civil, respectful fashion from which both sides can learn and neutral parties in the middle can learn. That's our core. That's what's missing nationally. That's what's missing on a lot of universities, not just Bucknell, and that's what we do.
On the subject of those issues and the current president of the United States, Bill, I know you've been following the compact that the Trump administration has proposed to various colleges and universities, including your undergraduate alma mater. I'm not actually sure if they proposed it to your graduate alma mater or not.
They didn't.
Okay. What's your take on it?
So just to expand on the question, the compact that the Department of Education has presented to 9 colleges and universities, I think 6 of them are private and 3 are public, who were categorized by the Department of Education as good players in the educational space, was an agreement where these colleges would agree to a dozen or fewer requirements in return for preference in federal funding. Dartmouth was one of the 9. I advise my alma mater not to sign it. I think it's federal overreach. Many of the things I agree with. I think a tuition freeze would be great, at least in the short term. But I don't think that's price controls for me. Classic liberal. Mm-hmm. It's not the role of government to tell me what I can price my services for.
So you'd be in favor of a tuition freeze, but not the feds demanding it?
Yeah, and maybe a state could do it for the 3 public universities. Mm-hmm. The University of Texas, if Texas wants to do that, that's they're funding it. That's okay. Mm-hmm. But Dartmouth, particularly Dartmouth, has its whole core is based on its private status. Mm-hmm. The famous Dartmouth College versus Woodward case of 1812, 1819, where the state of New Hampshire tried to take over the college, and the college sued. Daniel Webster argued the case before the Supreme Court, and Dartmouth remained a private institution, was just over this issue of government overreach. So I think Dartmouth is particularly, on principle, would have a difficult time signing this. If I were a trustee, I wouldn't vote for it. The other reason is a very practical one, that of the 9 schools, Dartmouth by a margin gets the least federal funding. So we've got the least at risk. Which makes it a little easier, if it is easy. I don't think when you're taking on the feds, it's ever an easy decision. But it's not you don't have as much risk as the other 6 private schools do.
Would you also argue that your alma mater, by a margin, has done more than the other schools in favor of?
Oh, that's why that's why they're on the list of good players. The Atlantic described what President Bylock has been able to accomplish at Dartmouth as she's made Dartmouth into the Switzerland of the Ivies. She's restored standardized testing, a requirement of the compact that she's already done, without federal interference. Mm-hmm. She's dealt appropriately with violent student protesters.
Which is what, Bill? What's dealing with that appropriately?
She's set boundaries of what was free expression under the First Amendment and what wasn't, and if there wasn't, she said that there would be consequences. And when they drove through that stop sign and ignored the first warning, she had severe consequence. She implemented severe consequences. Mm-hmm. She shortly after October 7th, 2023, she began a series of colloquia led by the head of Arabic studies and the head of Jewish studies, which has turned into an enormously successful educational experience. She's she's brought alumni like myself who were disenfranchised for decades back into the orbit because she has put out there a statement of institutional neutrality. I, as a professor, if I were at Dartmouth, have the right of free speech. I can say whatever I want. But she, speaking for the university, cannot on any political matter. The university cannot take sides on political matters. And it's basically a version of the Chicago principles, started at the University of Chicago, that 100 or so colleges and universities have signed on for. She's doing a marvelous job up there.
Are you optimistic that we will see more presidents like that of your alma mater in the coming years, and not in any particular area, but in our country in general?
Yeah, I am. I think that the Kirk. I think and I hope. I'm an optimist. Martin Luther King did not die in vain. If you look at the plight of blacks in 1968 and in 2025, although we're not perfect right today in terms of racial justice, we're a heck of a lot better than we were in 68. And I think King's assassination was a seminal moment in that awakening. I'm hoping that the Kirk assassination will be a similar seminal moment in our tolerance for viewpoint diversity.
From your lips to God's ears, as I understand they used to say, Coleman.
Yep.
Bill, we've talked a lot about where the Open Discourse Coalition came from. As you know, we're at a pivotal moment. We've been at this for 5 years. We just announced our first endowment, which was created in your honor to put us in an even better footing for our future, which includes addressing the need that you laid out beyond Bucknell. What do you want to say to our listeners, both whatever you want to say about those who've gotten us here? I mean, you know there are many listening who we wouldn't be here, we wouldn't have the opportunity to actualize them in this mission without them. But also looking forward, what do you want to say from your perspective about where we're headed as you think about our country's situation?
Yeah, I think that we are the model, and we have been the model for what's needed to begin to cure our country's divisions. I don't think you cure cultural issues from the top down. You have to cure them from the bottom up. And that's what we're doing. We're actually practicing what has to occur. And the other thing I would say to our friends out there is a very practical one. We are a small entrepreneurial organization, and a dollar coming our way moves the needle a heck of a lot farther along than it will in just about any other not-for-profit you can think of. We are lean, we're mean, and we leverage every dollar that you generously support us with.
Well said, Bill. As you know, there are 3 questions that I generally ask, not generally, there are 3 questions that I ask everyone who appears on this broadcast. I've already asked you one of them. There are 2 left. I'm going to ask them to you in conclusion.
What was the one, the ODC one? Why are you at ODC?
Why are you so passionate about our mission? You've already addressed that beautifully. I'm going to ask you the 2 others. Before I do that, is there anything else you want to say to our audience that I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? I'm going to give you the open mic question.
Well, you didn't get into my favorite music. You didn't get into my favorite sports.
You want to do a rapid round?
Yeah, we can do a
favorite music.
Love the Rolling Stones, Wild Horses.
Why do you love dogs?
There are no bad dogs, there are bad people.
Favorite sports teams?
Steelers, Minnesota Twins.
Why?
Steelers, Pennsylvania. Joe Namath was one of my idols growing up. Pennsylvania guy. University of Alabama, therefore, is my college team. Minnesota Twins because this dopey kid from public high school, his sophomore year, in the group men's room, locker room, meets a guy, and it turns out his father owns the Minnesota Twins. So I actually sold beer in the old Metropolitan Stadium after I got out of the Navy one summer. And that was a lot of fun, so I adopted their team as my team. That's why they're Twins.
Earlier you made reference to St. Joan of Sanibel. Who's that, and why is she so great?
It's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. Joan, formerly known as Leahy, who rescued me from the wilderness in 1994 and has tolerated me ever since.
The little town you mentioned in Pennsylvania where you had that weekend house, where is it? Give people who don't know about it a few seconds about it.
The little town where I was mayor for 3 terms.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's called Eagles, plural, Mere. It's Eagles like the Philadelphia sports team. Mere, the Old English word for mountain lake. And that's what it is. It's a natural lake in the Allegheny Mountains, on the Allegheny front where the old North American continent ended. And it's a Victorian-era summer resort. There's 400 and some dwellings in the town, most of whom aren't heated, so it's a summer resort. I love it year-round, particularly when it's off-season. Very quiet, tranquil, a lot of communing with nature, great sunsets, and a lot of outdoor activities.
What'd you do for your 80th birthday?
I climbed Mount Washington with friends.
As a Dartmouth guy, how many times have you climbed Mount Washington, and what is its distinctive, the most dangerous, what again?
Oh, the most dangerous mountain in America. People are killed there nearly every year. It's a Dartmouth tradition. It's a Dartmouth thing. Tuckerman's Ravine. If I were a better skier, I would have skied down Tuckerman's Ravine. That's a Dartmouth thing too. So it's kind of a going home experience, a renewal of life experience.
How many times have you done it?
I've lost count.
Yeah. What's the next thing you're going to climb?
I don't know. I've got the ODC, success of the ODC. That'll be my next mountain to climb.
What is a hobby that you have that your former students might not know about?
Kayaking. I got into kayaking when I moved to Florida, and I really love it. And I was kayaking in Switzerland this past summer, and I did my first whitewater kayak experience this past summer, which I'm never too old to do something new.
Was that in Switzerland?
Yep.
Describe where your Switzerland place is. You were in Switzerland in June and July mostly?
July and August.
Or sorry, June and July, yeah.
A little bit of June. My Switzerland home is just west of Davos. It's one valley west of Davos, in the Schonfig Valley. Big town at the head of the valley is Arosa. I was kayaking at the headwaters of the Rhine River in what's called the Rheinschlucht, the Rhine Canyon, where the Rhine gets very narrow and fast and rocky and everything, and there are canyon walls on both sides of you. It's really neat.
The place you hang out in Florida, you mentioned St. Joan of Sanibel. Sanibel's a barrier island. Why do you love it so much?
Yeah, my mom and dad retired to Florida, and I never thought I would. it's crowded, it's high rises, it's a lot of New Yorkers. Nothing wrong with New Yorkers. But it reminded me I have trauma from my days in New York. So Joan and I discovered Sanibel on a fluke, on a Google search for dog-friendly beaches in Florida. And Sanibel came up. We went there one spring break for 2 nights, and it was different. 3/4 of the acreage is in conservancy of either the federal government, the state government, or private conservancies. So there's a lot of elbow room. The town fathers, when they founded the town 51 years ago, were prescient. There's no building taller than 3 stories, so there's not the population density that you get over on the East Coast or down in Marco Island or Naples or places. So you can literally walk on beaches and not see anybody for an hour. And you can go back in the mangrove groves kayaking and not see anybody for a day. So Eagles Mere there, Switzerland, I kind of like my elbow room, and that meets it in Florida.
What color do you wear on Fridays and why?
Ooh, that was a good one. Favorite color is green. Color of my high school, color of my college. I wear red on Fridays as a military tradition. Red is an acronym, RED, for Remember Everyone Deployed, and it's an acknowledgement that what we're enjoying in the civilian life in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, or State College, Pennsylvania, or New York City, or wherever we are in this great country, is only because there are those who are putting their lives at risk to protect our freedoms. When I was in the military, I began celebrating Groundhog Day because it was the only holiday I seemed to ever be home for. And I've never forgotten those moments. I wasn't particularly happy about missing those holidays when I was deployed, but I knew it was necessary, and I don't want to forget the people who are doing it today. And we've spread that tradition to ODC, thanks to you.
Honored to stand on your shoulders on that one, Bill. The one day a year that you drink hard alcohol.
Oh, St. David's Day, March 1st. St. David is the patron saint of Wales. My mother was Welsh. My immigrant grandfather was Welsh. And Penderyn is a malted Welsh whiskey that I'm told tastes like Scotch to some people. And my brother and I share a shot of Penderyn each St. David's Day.
You introduced me to Welsh whiskey, and I'll never be the same again. It's good stuff. Bill asked too, what's a great book that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I've heard the other podcasts, and most people go to nonfiction. I am not a great nonfiction reader, but in thinking about this question, which I anticipated, a nonfiction book that I would recommend now, and I've recently gone back and reread parts of it, is by a professor named Walter Russell Mead, and it's called Special Providence. And Special Providence is a quote from Bismarck of Germany, who was observing American foreign policy, and it was so irrational, so erratic, changed so much with draconian swings in different directions. He could not explain the success of America with such a screwed up foreign policy, except for providence from God. And he, in the book, he lays out a matrix into which he fits all of our presidential leaders. And the matrix on one axis has the focus of the president. Is it economic, improving the wealth of the population, or is it promoting democratic rights, constitutional rights? And on the other axis, he categorizes the president as either being a globalist or domestic focused. And the four, they're not actually presidents. One's not a president, but one was a foreign policy leader. Exemplars that he puts in each box. So in the democracy globalist, he has Woodrow Wilson. In the democracy domestic, he has Thomas Jefferson. In the increasing wealth globalist, he has Alexander Hamilton. And in the increasing wealth domestic, he has Andrew Jackson. So particularly with the shifts in foreign policy that we've seen, radical shift we've seen in foreign policy in the last 18 months, I think it's a worthy read. Now, I think I learn more personally from reading fiction than I do from reading nonfiction. Seems counterintuitive at first, but I think great novelists have a few things going for them. One, they're great observers of human nature. They really understand the human dynamic. The second is they're great at expressing themselves. And the third is they can sometimes clarify what in real life is the fog of war. So sometimes the messages are easier to see in fiction than they are in nonfiction. In that spirit, I'm a sailor, I'm a Navy guy. I love sea stories. Joseph Conrad's Typhoon, Herman Melville's Moby Dick, and for those of you who don't like reading doorstops, his book, Novella, a small, very short book, 100 pages or so, Billy Budd. I use Billy Budd in every leadership course I teach. It's got some profound lessons in there. Thomas Mann's Magic Map, only because it happened in Switzerland where I live. So there's some of my favorites.
Bill, I'm glad the secret has gotten out through this podcast starting of that question, because I find the fact that people know it's coming and prepare leads to even more interesting answers than I got before. You clearly prepared that one. I'm going to exercise the privilege of the moderator and add a question that I should have put in our rapid fire round, but your mention of Providence reminded me that I find not too many of your former students know about your love for hymns. What are some of your favorite hymns?
Oh, my favorite. Cumranda, which is the Welsh national anthem, is in English. One of the versions of it is "Guide Me, O Great Jehovah." That will be played at my funeral. The Navy hymn will be played at my funeral. So those are probably my two all-time favorites. I also like the Old Rugged Cross. Another one. It's four of them. That's good.
That'll work. Okay, Bill, lastly, who is your favorite world historical figure and why?
Yeah, this one was teased too, and the default would be Churchill. He's my hero. But I'm fascinated with Jesus. And I look forward to meeting him someday because I'd love to know his story.
Well, there's no better way to close than that. One of the things I love about you having become my professor and our mission is you never know where the conversation is going to go, and you always learn something from it. I think that's at the heart of the beauty of what we get to do. I'm honored that I get to do it with you. It's never what I imagined my life would turn into when you called me into your office all those years ago. It's a great privilege, as is this conversation. Thank you for having it.
Thank you for having me.